Hello and welcome to another episode of Run Till You're Done. This week we have a completely different guest to our usual format. They are one half of Headspace Runs coaching, but not the half that you were probably expecting. We are joined by the psychological half of the team to hopefully answer some questions we have about the mental side of running, not only from Mike and I, but to the listeners of the podcast as well. Welcome to the show, Alice Beveridge.
Oh, thank you so much for having me along. It's great to see you both.
Welcome, Alice. First question that we always ask people. Nikki thought that this would be hilarious to ask you as a non-runner, but you are involved with running. So how did you get into running?
So weirdly, I probably ran before Ross did, but not in any way that people would recognise as running in comparison to like full-blown ultra craziness. I was like a nice little couple of kilometres on a treadmill girl, and like my background is in performance gymnastics, so 17 metres up to a vault was about the extent of my running prowess. And then I don't know if Ross has spoken about this a lot, but he started running on our honeymoon, which I have chosen not to take to heart. Rainy day in South Africa after a week of eating and drinking everything in sight, and we had a rainy day, so we thought we'll pop down to the gym and I think Ross was planning to sit in the hot tub, which was out of order, and he got on a treadmill and lasted about 37 seconds, and that is when he started running. And at that point in time, I could run better than he could, I could run further than he could, I could laugh at him when he came home and laid down on the floor and thought he was dying. Whereas these days, I think it would be fair to say that I am the runner's widow. I do dabble now and then. I do every so often just go, right, I'm going to do some of this stupid running stuff that all of you do. And I can do an all right 5K. After that, I get bored. I did once do a marathon purely out of spite. Hated every single second of it from start to finish. But no, I would say how I got into running was more because my darling husband, Ross, is big into his running, and I'd say, like, as my mug says, I'm the runner's widow. I'm the one that's I make it to every finish line, whether he does or not, because I'm the one that's usually waiting there for him rather than the one that's trying to get over it.
So you said there that you've done a marathon, so I assume as your first marathon, your only marathon, was it better than Ross's first?
Oh no, oh my God, no. It was during lockdown. I was meant to do London 2020. I got a ballot place for London 2020, and what was annoying is I actually properly trained for it and was like ready to go. And then obviously COVID came along and I was like, right, that's it, out the window. But we live really remotely, like super rurally, and we've got a motorbike racing track behind our house. And about a week before, I basically went, screw it, I'm just going to go and do it, and I'm going to run it around this stupid track. So my marathon was run in circles. This was before backyard ultras were even like a proper thing. It was run in circles, 19 laps of that stupid track, and I should have changed direction halfway round because I think I've done irreparable damage to parts of my body from running like a haggis round that track.
No wonder you hated it then if you'd done it on a track. That's like one of these disgusting Cobain events that Mike does.
Yeah, I don't recommend. Do not recommend.
So you say that you got into running because of Ross, and years later you set up a coaching company together. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier this year, we set up Headspace Run coaching, which is a combination of your slightly more traditional running coaching, but with a little bit of psychological support as well. So my day job is I'm a psychologist by trade, a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. So my main kind of day-to-day is working in businesses with leadership development, mindset, coaching, that sort of thing. But I also run a gymnastics club on the side, so I'm still involved in performance sport, and I've spent pretty much all of my career doing things to help people get better at stuff, whether that's in sport or business. And Ross and I had been talking for ages about how he was wanting to get into coaching. I've been coaching gymnastics since I was about 14 years old, and the opportunity for him arose through the running club that he's a part of. Haddington Running Club very kindly put him through all of his coaching training. And I think it just gave him the bug. You know, he was like, right, I think it's time to do this. And on one of our morning dog walks, which is a married couple with 2 young kids, once they're on the bus, that's pretty much the only time of the day that we actually speak to each other. We're like, right, are we going to do this? Because normally those walks have been when we've had our kind of mindset conversations, especially when he's been coming into a race. And I've got to watch him grow as a runner, both physically and psychologically. And it's been really interesting seeing how those conversations about how we're thinking and feeling about running and everything else just impact what we do with the plan. Like, the plan is so important because it gives us accountability. And if that plan is created with your kind of lifestyle in mind, then you're much more likely to do it. But we also recognise that people often need that kind of blended approach of physical training and mindset psychology. And my master's is in applied positive psychology, like heavy on the applied. You know, it's like, I'm a big believer that research is where we should be starting with the way that we think about the world and ourselves and what it is that we do. But so much good quality research just ends up in journals or on articles that people can't even access because they're behind paywalls. So I'm a big believer in how do we actually apply the theory to practice so that we can take all of this phenomenal research that exists and is heavily invested in and apply it to individuals' lives. So really out of those conversations, Headspace was born, and yeah, it's going really well, and it's weirdly really nice working with my husband. I don't think I ever would have said that because we met working together, and when we stopped working together I was like, that was us, we're done. Not from a relationship perspective, but well, that was the only time in his life that he's ever been my boss, but he's definitely not my boss now. But working with him, because he's got such a passion for the running and I love the way that people's minds work, it just seems to work for us.
And most of the listeners will know, like, training plans. Ross does that side of things, and that's the side that we know. How does it work from your perspective with the mindset? Do you give exercises the same way Ross would deliver workouts for the runs?
So there's a kind of a combination. There's different ways that we can do it for people that just want a little bit of mindset training, but without the sort of the full commitment, the full whammy. We have like a mindset journal that they can work through. So all of our clients get a copy of that mindset journal that they can work through. That's available to buy separately as well on the website. But for those that take on the full whammy plan of mind and body, they get a monthly one-to-one with me. And we pretty much cover everything and anything. And that I always say when I do one-to-one coaching with people, I've seen everything. I've seen the tears, the tantrums, I've seen the strops, I've seen the ups, I've seen the downs. And those are like completely confidential conversations where, yes, we talk about running, but we also talk about life, because life affects our running and running affects our life. So when we take a really holistic approach to that, it's often like we might start off talking about nutrition and how they're managing to fit that into their week and their planning, or we're maybe talking about the guilt that comes with being a parent and a partner, and then trying to fit your runs in, and how we actually structure our relationships and have conversations about what that looks like in practice for different families. For others, we know, particularly in ultra running, mental health plays a huge factor in why people get into this particularly crazy version of the sport. So there's lots of conversations to be had around mental health and how we're thinking, how we're feeling, and how we use running as a tool to help support that mental well-being as well. So each of those coaching sessions is really about meeting the person where they are, being like, right, what's going on? How can I help? Now, I always say I don't come to any of those coaching sessions with a particular agenda. And sometimes I'll be like, oh, we spoke loads about this thing the last time. Like, oh no, that's 3 weeks ago, I've moved on. And I think it's really important that people are able to sort of come into those sessions, and sometimes it's a vent or an offload, and other times it's a, right, actually this race is coming up and I'm starting to crap myself a little bit. How do I manage the nerves? How do I do that? See, when I get into that dark hole around mile 18 or 58 or whatever it is for some people, how do I actually get out of that? How do I talk myself through it? How do I look after my well-being when I'm doing something that just through its very nature is not always great for your well-being in the moment. Running is very much type 2 fun. Or some of you weirdos enjoy it while you're doing it, but when you do the big stuff, the real satisfaction and joy comes at the end, and the hardship's really important as part of that. So it's not about being comfortable all the time. So a lot of my coaching focuses on when you are uncomfortable or experiencing pain, what do you do about it and how do you manage it?
I
I
don't
think
know.
as you say, some people enjoy being uncomfortable. Is
Yeah.
that not why we do it?
Oh, I think so. It has to be, right? There has to be a good reason. That's about as good a reason as I can find. But yeah, I think there's something really special happens in that moment of discomfort. I think a lot of us are scared of it. Like, am I pushing too far? Can I do this? Is my body able to manage this? Am I strong enough? Am I tough enough? Is everybody else better than me? Like, there's something really special happens when we're like, this might be too hard. Some of us live incredibly safe lives or have protected ourselves from potential failure. But you can, like, the thing that I kind of love about this sport is you can have done everything right in training and one thing can go wrong while you're out there and it messes with your entire plan. So, like, the adaptability and flexibility that we need to be able to adjust our plans in real time is really, like, I think that's where the real mental strength and toughness comes when you're actually out there on the course.
Well, I don't know about you, Mike, but I know, excuse me, when I'm going up a hill, I hate it. I definitely do not enjoy it in the slightest. And it's interesting, as you say, because you do say to yourself, why do I do this as you're in the middle of doing it? But the thing for me at the end, when I've done a big run, I went, oh, I've just done that. And that's where the buzz comes, I suppose, for me at the time. And yeah, it's a really cool sport, as you say, mentally, more than anything.
Yeah, there's a phrase, and I can't even remember what it was. The only way you know your limits is if you push yourself to the limit. And I think that's part of the enjoyment that I get out of it, pushing myself to that. I've never reached that limit yet, and I think that's possibly what I'm craving. So trying to reach it.
And it's interesting because it crops up in almost every environment. When people do hard things, people go, oh, I could never do that. And my response to that is like, you probably could if you decided you wanted to. Yeah. It's like quite like people go, oh, I could never have that many kids. Well, see, if you have that many kids, you do it. I could never deal with everything that you do. It's like, well, if you had to, you would, and it is often that finding what the limit is it's one of the best motivators in the world. Like, chasing medals or trying to beat somebody else, it's all right, but the satisfaction that you get with that disappears really quickly. Whereas when you do something, even if you come last, right? Even if your time's not good, even if it was hard, even if you cried a little bit or a lot along the way, when you do something, you're like, that is the best effort I could have put into that today. That's where you get a completely different kind of happiness and satisfaction. It's the kind of the difference between what I'm going to go all psychology geek on you for a minute here. It's the difference between what I would call hedonic happiness, that pursuit of pleasure, and eudaimonic happiness, that search of meaning and purpose and connecting to something that's important to you. And the more time we spend doing the stuff that might be hard, but is meaningful and purposeful to us, the better we're going to feel. And yeah, I think a lot of people are scared of doing that because it involves discomfort, but I think discomfort's quite good fun.
I think as well, depending on how big the thing you've done, a lot of disbelief comes after it as well. Like, the biggest thing I've ever done, and it's tiny to a lot of people, is 42 miles, the Devil of the Highlands, and I still can't even now believe that was over a year ago that I managed to finish that. And I've just recently signed up for a race that's half the distance, and I'm like, oh no, I'm backing myself because I've not done an event for ages. And my coach responded to me, she's like, come on, Nikki, it's half the devil. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that.
Yeah.
So
I've got a theory with running, and I think this is why Ross and Mike, you might be able to connect with this as well. I think the reason that Ross likes the backyard is because there isn't a number at the end of it. Like, you don't know what it is you're chasing. Whereas, like, that day that I ran a marathon, right? That's unlikely to ever happen again. But that day, I could run 26.2 miles because I decided I was running 26.2 miles. When I go through my little fads of getting back on the treadmill or going out for a run, if I say I'm running 3K, I can run 3K. You know, for an ultra runner, it's like, if your race is 97 miles, right? Say, is that what the West Highland Way is? It's about that, right? Say you're running the West Highland Way in 96, right? If you say that day, I have to run 96 miles today, then that's what you're going to do, and you're going to be gubbed at the end of it. But if you decide to tack Great Glen on the other end and get into Fort Williams, only your halfway point, your mindset shifts completely. So, like, so much of running is psychological. I think once you get to a certain level of being able to put one foot in front of the other in a relatively athletic way, the next bit is really, well, what does your mind think it can do? Whereas, Mike, with the backyards, like, I'm going to ask you a question, or that kind of goes back to front, right? But when you do a backyard, it's part of the joy of it, not hoping that you get to find out how far you can actually go.
100%. As I said earlier, I've not reached my limit. I want to know what my limit is. But on sort of contrary to that, in the backyard, people say don't set a limit, because then once you reach it, you'll stop.
Yeah.
But I do set a limit, but I set a limit that is only just achievable.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I'm saying 80 yards.
Yeah.
I think I could probably do it if every star aligned in the sky. Does it scare me? Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm. Good.
But if I got to 80 yards, I would be delighted.
Mm-hmm.
But it's setting that number.
Yeah.
But would I be happy with 60? Yeah, I probably would. Well, I definitely would. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think as well that format in particular, you're obviously limited a little bit by how far the second person can go.
Yes.
So yeah, but it's just really interesting that being able to endure discomfort and move towards a goal that you don't know what the limit is yet. I think that's where true motivation comes from.
Can I just say as well, Mike, see, when you get to 80 and I'm on your crew, you bet your ass I'm shoving you out for 81. You are not stopping.
The thing I was going to say, people listening probably find more relatable rather than the West Highland Way and then the Great Glen, because I think there's only about 4 or 5 people that have done that I know of. Doing the fling, lots of people have done the fling. They get to the end of it and they go, I'm done. I'm wiped out. I couldn't possibly do another. But if you had told them that they're doing the West Highland Way, then they would have done it. Yeah. And the fling is just the first half.
Just the first half, yeah. Totally.
Also, as well, when you say about the West Highland Way and the 96 miles, Alice, if you told me I had to do that, I wouldn't make the start line. I'd be so feeling sick. I'd be like, nope, I'm going to the beech tree, which is only 7, and then we'll just walk away from that.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll just see how far we go, because that is it's a huge distance.
But are you saying, Nikki, that you wouldn't feel like that if you got told that you were going out for a 6-mile run to the beech tree?
Probably not. It doesn't scare me.
So what point along the West Highland Way does then, if you've done the fling?
Well, this is it. I didn't make the fling, unfortunately. But
sorry, it was the devil that you did, wasn't it? Right.
Yeah.
So you know that you can do that. Have you done any of? You must have recce'd some of the first half then.
I've done most of it. It's just, I think it's the putting it all together, and as I've discussed in the podcast in the past with Mike and with like really close friends as well, and I am known even on social gatherings for being sick before I turn up for anything. I've no idea what it is. Even if it's a social jaunt, 13k on the Pentlands, I know when I'm meeting people, I'm going to be sick in the morning. I don't know what it is. I'm now putting it down to overexcitement, because, as you say, I know I can do the distance.
Yeah.
I meet my pals, and my pals even said to me, why are you like this? You know, you get there and you're fine and you talk to everyone. I'm like, I don't know. It really, really bugs me. But
it's just like that's just a nervous response to your environment, and like the fascinating thing about feeling nervous about something and feeling excited about it is physiologically it's almost identical.
Yeah.
But the difference is, how do we actually interpret those physical signals that we get when we're nervous or excited? Like, if you love a roller coaster, right, and you're standing in the line for a roller coaster, you might get butterflies in your belly and sweaty palms, you might start talking more quickly, you might get a little bit jittery, right? And because you love roller coasters, you're going to interpret that as, I'm really excited about getting on this roller coaster. Then you get on it, and because you've already primed yourself to enjoy it, as you get that big lurching stomach and you're feeling as you go all up and over that big first hump and down, you got plummeted down, you scream with joy and glee and delight. Whereas if you hate a roller coaster and you've been dragged by your mate that loves a roller coaster and you'd rather be at the bottom holding the bags, you might feel the exact same way. You might get the butterflies in your belly, you might get sweaty palms, you might start talking really quickly. And because you hate roller coasters, you're going to go, this is because I'm scared, this is because I'm nervous. And as a result, those butterflies start to feel like a sick tummy rather than an excited tummy. That roller coaster comes in, you are forced on it. And as soon as you feel that lurch as you go down, that scream is probably twice as loud and more piercing across the amusement park because you're terrified, and terror has a very particular sound compared to excitement, but physiologically they're almost identical. So a lot of the time, if you find yourself getting really nervous or anxious or worked up beforehand, whether that presents itself as feeling sick, going to the toilet 400 times, getting really jittery, dodgy sleep, like starting to pick, I'm a picker, I pick my thumbs when I'm nervous or anxious. Some people chew their lip, like whatever your kind of nervous, anxious tick is, a lot of the time it's just reframing, like, right, why am I doing that? It's like, I'm doing that because I'm really excited about what I'm about to do. And I should be excited because I get to do hard things.
Yeah.
Yes, it's nerve-wracking. Yeah, I might not make it to the end. Yeah, I don't know, I might get taken out by a seagull halfway through. Who knows? Weird things happen. That's a genuine example. I almost got taken out by a seagull at the beginning of the West Highland Way one year. So like, weird stuff can happen when you're out there, but that bit before, when the nerves and excitement start to kick in, we actually have a choice in how we choose to interpret that. Whereas if you tell yourself the story of every time before an event, I get sick, right? What then happens when you feel that sort of physiological response in your stomach is your brain goes, oh, I get sick before every race, therefore I'll be sick. Right? Whereas if you start to go, no, I get excited before every event, yeah, there's a good reason to be a bit nervous as well. But I get to do this. This is something hard that I can do. We can start to almost rewire and retrain our brain to manage those nerves much more effectively.
Thank you so much for that. I need to start doing more social runs then, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, practice it. Like, you kind of want to practice feeling nervous. Like, you're never going to replicate what it feels like to turn up on a start line on the day of a race. But the more you get out there, and if you know that you even feel like that before a social run, go and practice it and embrace it.
Yeah.
Nikki,
thanks so much.
I know that Alice has said it a lot better than I said it, but told you so.
I know that. I know. It's really tough though to try and put into practice for sure, because when you're as well, I've definitely got better at eating before. Like now I'm able to keep a banana down.
Good.
So we're making progress. So Mike, have you got any questions? I feel as though we've been totally hogging Alice. Should we move on to the listener questions?
Yep, sure.
So the first question that came through pretty much within 3 minutes of me posting on Instagram, the question box, is why are some people negative about others' achievements?
Oh, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I think we've all been there, either on the receiving end of it, or I'm going to put it out there, occasionally the person that feels negative about someone else's achievement. And I think we have to be careful how we frame this, right? Because there's being negative out loud to somebody about someone's achievement. Like if you're at an award ceremony and somebody else gets an award and you think somebody else should have got it and you should have got it, right? There, you've got a moment there where you can go, oh, I should have got that award, right? And you can think it or you can say it. And the two things come from very different places. There's probably a common root, but the feeling of threat or jealousy when somebody else does well is directly related to the mindset that we have and that we develop. And the thing about a mindset is mindsets are choices that we've made over and over again to the point that they become a habit. So if you want the research on this, depends how geeky you want me to be here today, right? Carol Dweck's book on mindset pretty much breaks down what a mindset is, what ones are helpful and what ones are less helpful. And she divides it into fixed mindset and growth mindset. And the thing that I love about applied positive psychology is that that kind of terminology has started to make it into the mainstream. It's like, do you have a fixed mindset? Do you have a growth mindset? The challenge is when it gets into mainstream is it gets a little bit kind of bastardized by pop psychology and you miss the roots occasionally. So the first thing we have to understand is that mindsets start to develop when we're about the age of 3 or 4. Like differences in mindsets are apparent in young children, and you can see this by doing things like giving them jigsaw puzzles that are either far too easy for them, that they're almost insulting, or giving them something that's moderately challenging, giving them something that's really challenging, or giving them something that's impossible. And you'll notice a difference even at that age of how do they actually react to respond to that? Do they give up and go in a huff because it's too difficult, or do they keep on trying? And then if you look at how that develops as people go through their life, you start to see, well, what is somebody's mindset towards a challenge? Do they embrace the challenge? Do they persist when things are difficult or challenging? Or do they give up? Do they avoid it? Do they fear it? Like, avoidance is a big one. You know, like a lot of the time when you hear things like, oh, I can't believe you did that, I could never do that, that's more that person saying, I'm too scared to try doing that. You know, it's like, that sounds like that would be really hard work. I don't know if I could put in that level of hard work. I don't know if I have that level of discipline to be able to do that thing. Or even worse, it's like, if I did put in that effort and I failed, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm not good enough? Does that mean that other people are going to judge me? You know, like how we view things like effort directly affect our mindset. So when we have a growth mindset, we're more likely to embrace, persist, understand that effort is part of the process of success. And then when we see somebody else being successful, we are much more likely to be inspired or motivated by what it is that they're doing. Whereas if you flip that round, right, and when you are faced with a challenge, you avoid it and you fear it, or you think that effort is weakless, that's not even a word, weakness or pointless, then when you see somebody being successful, you are much more likely to feel threatened or angry or jealous of that. And this weird thing happens if from a young age you see other people's success as being a bad thing. We enter a state of what's known as cognitive dissonance, which is where we can hold two opposing beliefs at the same time, which is success is a good thing, but when other people are successful, I don't feel good about it. And what you start to get is this weird relationship with other people's success and your self-worth. So if I see somebody else being successful and as a result I feel bad about it, the next time I'm presented with a challenge, I am more likely to avoid it because my brain goes, no, if you do that, you might feel bad because success is bad. And it sounds completely counterintuitive, but that then becomes really cyclical. So we can get stuck in this kind of fixed negative mindset where we avoid the hard stuff, we get annoyed or frustrated when other people are successful, and a lot of it is because we're scared about having to put effort into something. And some of that links to things like imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's just habits. You know, like we build habits day by day, they're repeated behaviours, it changes our brain chemistry. Like, have you guys ever turned up in the car park of somewhere with no recollection of the journey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone's had that experience at some point, right? You turn, you're like, I do not know how I got here. It's like, I do not remember indicating, I do not remember stopping at the lights, but here I am. The reason that we do that is because that process becomes automatic. The exact same thing happens in our brain when we repeat a behaviour over and over again. The neural pathway becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, if one day you are driving to work and there's been a storm and a tree is down over the road, all of a sudden we have to turn down the volume on the radio so we can see properly so that we can concentrate, right? Because the automatic process has been interrupted. Suddenly we have to pay more attention. You have to do that little detour. Now, if you had to do that little detour every day for 3 weeks, you could start doing it with the radio on again because you wouldn't have to think about it so much. It's the exact same with retraining our brain to have different neural pathways. The first time we have to interrupt a behaviour, the first thing we have to do is catch ourselves being negative about somebody else's success and then say, why am I doing that? Is that who I want to be? Do I want to be the person that rains on everybody else's parade, or do I want to be their biggest cheerleader? Because if I want to be their biggest cheerleader, my behaviour has to change. And there's a huge chunk of accountability in there, right? You have to say, there is something that I am doing wrong. I need to change it. Now, that in itself is not enough, because you then actually have to change the behaviour, which means you have to catch yourself doing it every single time until it becomes a habit and you're not doing it anymore. But that underlying neural pathway can be so strong that it can be really difficult to change that behaviour. So often when we see or hear somebody being negative about somebody else's success, it's because they don't actually know how to process success, because probably of experiences they've had previously in life. And you're not going to be able to go in and unpick all of that, but if that is directed towards you, it's often saying, right, this actually isn't a personal attack on me. Would I ask this person for advice is always what I come back to. And if the answer to that is no, then why do you care about their opinion?
Yeah.
Something related to that, but possibly the exact opposite, is I've done things like won a race and whatever, and then felt it wasn't as good. I shouldn't have won it, sort of thing.
So you feel like there was somebody better in the field that should have beaten you?
Yeah, I didn't deserve it.
You didn't deserve it. Oh, so we're properly stepping into imposter syndrome territory then.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it that thing of why would I deserve to win?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
The imposter syndrome, that's the next part of the. Nikki's got part 1 of imposter syndrome as the next question. I think there's a whole episode in itself on imposter syndrome.
Absolutely. I could talk to you about imposter syndrome for about 3 hours.
Yeah, and I think we could listen.
Let's set that up.
We can absolutely set that up. Do you want a little whistle-stop tour of imposter syndrome, just so we've got it as a little intro so people can kind of, like, we've mentioned it a couple of times, and it's one of these things, again, it's been dragged into pop psychology, so we see it everywhere. You jump on TikTok or Instagram and people going, oh, I've got imposter syndrome, and then suddenly everybody has imposter syndrome. The interesting thing about imposter syndrome is about 70% of the population experience imposter syndrome at some point. We're just really crap at talking about it. And as soon as you put a group of people in a room, which I do regularly in my day job, and goes, anybody ever felt any of these things? And every single person goes, yeah. Everybody also looks around and goes, oh, it's not just me. And I think when we look at this concept of imposter syndrome, we need to understand what it is and why it exists. And it's kind of an umbrella term for a range of different responses to stuff. And if we do a full episode on this, I can go into this in loads of detail. But you basically have imposter syndrome being feeling like a phony, or being worried about getting caught out, or feeling like you're winging it, or it was a fluke. So if you put that into a running context, Mike, for you, if you win a race, it can be really easy to dismiss your effort as, oh, I was just lucky that day. Oh, my biggest competition had sprained their ankle the week before. If they'd been there, it would have been different. Especially if you're like, I could have done better. And it sounds slightly counterintuitive if you're like, I won and I didn't have to work that hard to win. Like, some people go, oh, I sound so cocky or so arrogant. No, that's nonsense, right? A very fine line between confidence and arrogance. But when we look at people who are doing really, really well, they generally want to win feeling like they have deserved it because they've gone all out. If you're able to beat the rest of the field, or at least hold your own with the rest of the field, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that was a bit easy. So there can be times where imposter syndrome comes out of not feeling challenged enough. And there's kind of 5 key types, right? And I'm going to watch your faces as I go through this to see which ones you experience, right? Number 1, we've got the perfectionist. 3 types of perfectionism. Internal perfectionism, I set really high standards for me, and often they are unachievable, and then I am disappointed when I don't meet the ridiculous high standard that I set, that nobody else knew about and I didn't tell anyone else about, but that makes me mad, right? So that's internal perfectionism. You've got external perfectionism, which is I have really high standards for other people, or I want other people to do things in a certain way. You might find this in your professional life if you have trouble delegating to other people. You know, like I can be a bit funny if people touch my spreadsheets. I'm like, no, no, no. If you touch my spreadsheet, you're going to break my spreadsheet, and my spreadsheet is perfect because I made it, right? You're not good enough to touch my spreadsheet, therefore I shall put the data in myself. Right, so we get that external perfectionism there. Then you get a kind of a cultural perfectionism, which is more other people expect me to behave in a particular way. And you can see this in a kind of social perspective. You know, there's particular cultures, like Jewish culture, for example. My sister-in-law is Jewish. I remember being at a wedding. She is a English professor at a very prestigious university over in the States, and I overheard a conversation with an uncle of hers asking her when she was going to get her proper job. And that's because they were like, no, you should be a doctor or a lawyer, and my brother had to hold me back, you know. So like you can have that cultural part of perfectionism. So there's 3 types there. Looking at your faces, Nikki, you are an internal perfectionist, aren't you? Yes.
Too right.
Yeah. Mike, I think you might be a mix of 1 and 2.
1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3. You're going for all of it. Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant. And even just having the knowledge that, okay, I can be a bit of a perfectionist is quite useful, because at that point you can start to ask yourself, what does good look like? Not what does excellent with a cherry on top look like, but what does good look like? What would I be satisfied with? And you can set yourself more realistic expectations. You've then got some other types of imposter syndrome. You've got the superhero, which is the person, this is, you'll probably find this more at work. I think you do find this in the running community as well. This is the, like in a work kind of environment, this is the person that turns up early, goes home late, barely takes their lunch, feels they have to do everything, is an absolute people pleaser, says yes to things despite not having the capacity to actually take it on. Right, so it's like yes, 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 yes. You then see this in the running community, and I'll be honest, I think Ross went through this at one point where he just said yes to everything. He wanted to be at every event, he wanted to do everything. There was one year where I think he did 12 decent sized ultras in a year, and all of my friends were like, are you going to divorce him yet? And I was like, maybe I will. But I have to go to this one. I was like, do you? And then once you get through that phase, I think you start to pick and choose the things that you actually want to do and are helpful for your running goals, rather than feeling like you have to be at everything to be valuable, you know, or to be worthy. So you've got that superhero bit. You've got the soloist. And I think running lends itself to this kind of thinking sometimes. And this is, I have to do it all myself. I have to sort my training plan out myself. I have to take accountability for everything myself. I cannot ask for help. I cannot ask for guidance. And this is where you start to see people doing loads of junk miles. You know, it's like, I'm just going to run and run and run and run and run because I don't really know how to do this properly, but I'm too scared to ask for guidance. And this is also where you start to see sort of higher levels of injury, because they haven't known how to stop and rest because they've never asked the question. And this is where the running community can be such a beautiful place, because there's so many people just willing to ask for help. It doesn't mean that you need to listen to every opinion. You know, all you need to do is be part of a WhatsApp group chat about a particular race or something that's coming up, and oh, here's 47 shoes that you should absolutely be wearing. It's like, I can only wear 1 pair of shoes at a time. Which ones should it be? And you can go and buy the one that Mike Raffan says is the best shoe ever to exist, and see if you've got fatter feet than Mike does. They're going to hurt. You know, so we can ask for advice without having to take it all, because if you take it all, your head's going to explode, right? So with the soloist, it's just about gradually making yourself more comfortable asking for help or support, and not thinking that it's a sign of weakness. You've got the natural genius, and this is like in an academic sense, these are the people that sail through school, college, university, never really have any adversity, which in turn means they never really have a chance to build any resilience, find themselves in an environment where all of a sudden everybody's just as good at them and they crap the bed. You know, they go, oh my God, everybody's better than me, and they properly panic. Put this in a running environment. This is like the runners that are just annoyingly naturally fast. Like, that's not me. Like, I am like I can run a 5K, but it's not impressive. If I turn up and I'm like, oh my God, I have to be able to run at the same speed as this 14-year-old that can do it in 17 minutes. You know, I'm setting myself really, really unrealistic expectations. Where if that 14-year-old can get out of his bed and do it in 17 minutes without really having to work that hard for it, and I don't know if that's a good 5K time or not for a 14-year-old, so for your running people can come after me, Mike. I'm sure you've got a spreadsheet somewhere that'll tell me exactly what is peak for that. But if you can do something really well without having to work that hard, then like you kind of fall into that trap of, well, I've never had to work that hard. So as you get older, or as you recover from injury, or as the next dreadful generation come through and start beating your times, you can start feeling really angry about that, you know, or really frustrated about that, because you've never actually had to build any resilience because you never failed anything before. I'm a big believer in fail hard, fail fast. Make mistakes, do stuff that is wrong. And some people look at me like I've got two heads. I always say, and my kids are in the background somewhere, so I don't actually want them to hear this out loud, but I always say I want them to make just enough mistakes. No, I don't want to have to drag them out of a ditch paralytic drunk, right? But you see, if they have a night where they make some silly decisions, as long as they don't hurt themselves and they know that they can phone and ask for us to pick them up, and their friends know that too, I am okay with them making mistakes. See, if they fail a test at school, brilliant, celebrate it. Because we actually need to learn how to fail. It's much more important than learning how to succeed. And the final one is the expert. And this is the person who feels they have to know everything about everything before they even get started. So like the whole all the gear and no idea thing, right, is the person that has bought all the stuff, turns up on the start line looking like a prize idiot because they've overdone it, right? And has actually forgotten how to learn how to do it. You know, it's why women don't apply for jobs. Okay, because we're like, we have to be able to meet 100% of the criteria before we'll apply, right? Sweeping gendered generalization, got the statistics to back it up if you want it. But you see these like differences in terms of confidence versus overconfidence versus underconfidence. So with that expert style, it's I can't go to a race until I know I'm going to get a really good time. Whereas really, the only way you're going to get a really good time is if you go and do lots of training and go and do lots of races. So yeah, there's a heap around imposter syndrome, and understanding the different times and places that it affects you from a running perspective is really important. Like, is it the start line? Is it the finish line? Is it before you get there? And the more you understand that, the easier it is to tackle.
Well, I think if that was a whistle-stop tour,
that was my short version.
I think we've definitely got an episode in there somewhere.
Definitely, for sure. That was really, really interesting. It was fascinating learning about that. And as you said at the start of it, you're saying about, Mike, how you don't deserve to be there, you didn't deserve to win, or whatever it was that you were saying. It's funny because I had a message through from a really good runner who was participating in an event with the best of trail runners, and they messaged saying, I can't believe I beat X, Y, and Z runner. And I messaged them back without even flinching, saying, I'm not surprised because you're a phenomenal runner. And I could see that they'd put the training in, and they're just an excellent runner. So it just goes to show you, I think, as you say, Alice, most people do get the imposter syndrome, even those at the top, like Mike as well.
Yeah, weirdly, I worry more about people that don't get imposter syndrome than people that do. Like, imposter syndrome generally shows a level of self-awareness that not everybody has been gifted with. And if you're able to sort of say, oh, I might not be the best out here, that's a really useful trait to have and to harness. Whereas if you rock up thinking you're an absolute rock star, like you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment. It'll work for like 0.01% of the population, but only one person can win a race.
Yeah.
You know? It's like if you rock up thinking I am amazing, I am God's gift to running, then unless you actually are, there's what I would call like a perception gap sometimes. Like you can just set yourself up for failure. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh, I've got a big whacking heap of like imposter syndrome, good, right? Just understand it and work out where it comes from, and then you can unpick it and then you can use it to your advantage rather than letting it get in your head.
Thanks very much for taking us through that, Alice. So the next question that we have is, are endorphins real or are they just in people's heads? And there's a part 2 to this question. Can your state of mental health affect the endorphins in exercise?
Yeah, do you know, I saw this question ahead of recording today and I was like, what a bloody brilliant question. Because see, the answers to are endorphins real or are they just in people's heads? The answer to both of them is yes, because yes, endorphins are real. Okay, they're a natural chemical that your body produces literally in your head, in your brain. And I'll geek out on this a little bit in a minute, but they work like a built-in painkiller and mood booster. So that kind of famous runner's high that we talk about, it's not just endorphins, it's kind of a cocktail of different chemical responses. We've got endorphins, we've got dopamine, we've got serotonin, we've got endocannabinoids, like all of them kind of mush themselves together and give you that euphoric post-exercise high that we chase. Mental health definitely affects it, right? And because they affect how you feel them. So low mood or stress or anxiety can absolutely blunt your responses here. So it's not imagined, right? And I think this is something that, like, understanding that chemical bit, if you don't mind me geeking out for a little second on this, right? Like endorphins are peptides that are produced by the brain and the pituitary gland. Okay, they attach to opioid receptors. Now, obviously, when we think of opioids, we can think of like the bad hard drugs, but opioids are really just things that make us feel good. And those attach in our nervous system, they reduce our pain perception. So it basically stops us feeling as much pain, and then it creates a sort of a better sense of well-being around it. The term endorphin literally comes from endogenous morphine. It means the body's own morphine. So when we have surgery or are in a lot of pain and we use morphine, we're basically tapping into those same opioid receptors to reduce the pain, but our body has an ability to do it itself. When we start looking at that runner's high that we talk about, people used to think it was just purely the endorphins that were there. But when we look at that kind of neurochemical cocktail, yes, we've got the endorphins, which kind of dull the pain and create a calmness. We've also got dopamine in there. So dopamine is highly associated with motivation and reward. You know, it's how we train animals. You know, it's like you use it, you get the treat, you know, that kind of classical conditioning bit is in there. If any of you have a toxic relationship with Amazon Prime, that little buy now button, or maybe Amazon Prime is the wrong one, maybe it's like Sports Shoes Direct or something like that, seems to be the trigger button in my household. But that motivation reward center is all driven by dopamine. We've got serotonin, which balances our mood and resilience. And then we've got the endocannabinoids, which are like cannabis, essentially like human, like internally produced cannabis, essentially, which basically makes you feel a bit blissful and floaty. Put all of those things together and you essentially have a cocktail for euphoria. So how intensely we feel that can depend on lots of things. So if you've got a really high level of stress going on, if your sleep is all over the place, if your hormones are all over the place, if mental health is not feeling stable, like that's kind of your baseline where we start from. So if you're in a good place psychologically, you might get a more intense runner's high. But the reason that we recommend and essentially like doctors prescribe exercise for people that are struggling with their mental well-being, and I know that people go to the doctor and say, oh, they just told me to lose weight. What they're really saying is go and get fit or go and do something that engages your entire body, because it starts to release this neurochemical cocktail. And that bit is quite addictive. It's why we do it again and again and again, and we become runners and we become gym rats, or we become addicted to that feeling. And I think with ultra runners, there's possibly an underlying tendency for some, and I'm going to be really general in how I speak about this, right? There can be an underlying mental health thing going on. So whether it's anxiety, whether that is low mood, depression, that then means in order to get the same hit, we start running further and further and further. You know, so it takes more of the activity to get that higher hit, essentially. So it's not that mental ill health or low sort of mood it's not like it cancels it out, it just lowers your baseline. So you need a little bit more in order to get that hit. So to kind of answer the question, it's not in people's heads, right? These chemicals are real, but how you experience them is deeply linked to your mental state and your overall well-being.
Thank you for answering that.
And I think all the questions are related, but the next one's about how, when you're running, say you're in a race, you're West Highland Way we talked about before, you're at Kinloch leaving and you think, I cannot go any further, I'm in so much pain, I need to have a sleep. How do you get past that?
That's really where like your adrenaline center often comes in. Like that boost of adrenaline that we get. See, if you're at Kinloch leaving, now I've never been at the front of a race, but I have walked up that hill. And I have walked up that hill after letting Ross plan a walk of the West Highland Way. Any spouses that are listening to this, do not let your ultra marathon runner partner plan a walk, because he had us doing like 27 miles a day. By the time we left Kinloch leaving, my blisters had blisters and I wanted to cry and was seriously considering my life choices. And then as we just started up that god-awful hill, people that we'd passed the day before walked past us. I was raging. I was like, how dare they? How dare they get up there? So like we can lean into some of these motivators, like that sudden burst of rage / adrenaline is really useful for getting me up there, right? But there's also two separate parts of our brain at play when we reach that point of pain. Like when every part of your body is telling you to stop, we have a choice. We can listen to that part of our body, or we can dig into something a little bit deeper. Now, the human part of our brain is known as our prefrontal cortex, so the bit right behind your forehead here. Like that is what we would refer to as our human brain. If any of you or your listeners have listened to or read The Chimp Paradox by Steve Peters, it's got a beautiful explanation of this. He uses this model of the human brain versus the chimp. And I have seen this in action when Ross has done races like this. You know, that point where your human brain is like, what are you doing? You're an idiot. This is a stupid way to spend your time. You could just stop. You could just lie down in this ditch, or in Ross's experience, graveyard, and have a nap, right? There is a high probability for typical functioning people that part of their brain would win. But when you train your body to do things like extreme sports, we almost have to be able to dull that voice a little bit and tap into something a bit deeper, like in our limbic system, which is responsible for all sorts of things. But it's like things like our sleeping patterns, our food cravings, our long-term memory are all in here. But it's also responsible for our emotional regulation. So it gets to decide whether we respond to these things or not. Steve Peters refers to this as your chimp brain, and he does a much better job of explaining all the ins and outs of this. But if you can harness that passionate side of your chimp rather than the stroppy side of your chimp, when your body is screaming, that's often the bit that's going to get you to the finish line. And very rarely well, in fact, let me ask you two a question. See, when you get over that finish line, how long does it take you to feel like you again? Is it instant, or do you need a little bit of come down time where you kind of like are a bit euphoric for a little while and then you sink into the what the hell did I just do?
You first, Mike.
I think it depends on the finish line. It's different experience. Well, a backyard ultra, you're crossing the finish line every hour.
Uh-huh.
But
and then you start again.
yeah, exactly.
That's
You need to feel yourself.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting answer from you, Mike, because that how you feel when you cross the finish line often comes down to how hard you feel you've worked in the race, right? If you've not felt like you've had to work really hard, you don't have to dig into that bit, right? Where if you're at that finish line and you've had to dig in and work really hard, then all of that adrenaline and energy and even some cortisol, like that stress hormone, kicks in. It pushes us over the finish line. And then those are quite short acting hormones that we release, but they take a little bit of time to just sort of drain themselves out of the bloodstream. And it can be 10 minutes, it can be a couple of hours, it can be a couple of days, where people kind of come back down. So one of the things we really want to think about is which part of our brain is in control when we're at that point that we want to stop, and are we willing to let it win? There are times when you should let it win, right? If you are injuring yourself, now obviously the nature of an ultramarathon is that you are deliberately injuring your body. Like, you are tearing your muscles, you are using your fat stores, you are kind of hurting yourself. It's why we need recovery. But I more mean like acute injury. So Ross's last backyard, his foot went. He was having problems with some of the tendons up the front of his foot, and he phoned me. He's like, I have to stop. Now, 5 years ago, he wouldn't have stopped. He'd have kept going, and he would have suffered the consequences for it. But that human brain was able to assess the situation that was there and say, this is a race-ending injury, right? So he could make a really sensible, rational decision of, I'm going to stop now so that I can recover from this properly. Right? In other races where he's just been a bit of a diva, and like, as his wife and crew, I can call him this, he can be a diva, right? He knows he can be a diva. Sometimes he really likes me at races, and other times he couldn't get shot at me quicker. It depends what he needs at a particular thing. But more often, when he's feeling like that, it's his chimp that needs to kick in and tell him to get over himself and get on with it. And we can dig into all different sorts of motivations at that point, but sometimes it's as simple as, like, the chimp likes instant gratification. So breaking it down to get to the next tree, get to the next lamppost, get to the next checkpoint, get to that person in front of you, get to the top of this hill, like breaking it down into chunks feeds your chimp with little bits of satisfaction. So if you feel yourself getting to that point, it's like, no, just keep going. One of my clients, we had a good conversation about this a few weeks ago, and they were like, I count. It's like, I just count 100 steps. And it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, gets to 100, starts again. And it's just because it gives your mind something to focus on right now in the present. So like little mantras, bits of sort of simple self-talk, you can shift your focus away from the pain. Like, pain is a response that our body reacts and listens to. Obviously, there's like pharmaceutical ways that we can shift away from that. I wouldn't like to see how many paracetamol some of you get through by the time you get to the end of one of these races. But you can also do this in a slightly more mindful way. And I don't want to sound like really airy-fairy when I talk about this, but drawing your attention to other things is really useful. Like drawing your attention to the rhythm of your run, the 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, or drawing your focus to the surroundings, focusing on something further away and saying, that's what I'm looking at. And if you're able to sort of just distract yourself, often that feeling of pain can start to pass and your sensible head can get back in control. The other bit is just remembering why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like, is giving up now, I always go with like the 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 week kind of rule. There's a million different versions of it. It's like, is this going to be the same in 5 minutes? Right? So if you're running and you've got a wrinkle in your sock, is that going to be the same in 5 minutes? Yes. Cool. Stop and sort it out. Right? Is this thing still going to be a problem in 5 hours? No, I'll probably have come through it. Right? And if I stop now and sort that sock, I'm going to come through the other side of it. When you start thinking about 5 days after the race, if I stop now, how am I going to feel in 5 days? Is my excuse that I am making now about being a bit uncomfortable, and let's face it, you paid to be there, right? You signed up. Some part of you wants to get to that finish line, even if that is escaping you right now. if you can say, how am I going to feel if I don't do this? Then that's often a really good motivator. If you're like, I'm going to be broken and in hospital because my leg has fallen off, then stop the race. If you're like, no, I was just having a little bit of a diva moment, get over yourself and get on with it.
As you say that, Alice, that's actually what did get me through the devil, because I got up to the top of the staircase, phoned my husband, and was crying on the phone to him saying, I cannot do another 6 hours of this shit, because I know how long the recce took me, and I was not up from 2:30 that morning, and I was on fresh legs, and got to Kinloch leaving, and always told myself, if I'd got to Lundavra and got timed out, and the checkpoint was 12k from there to the finish, always told myself, oh, I would be devastated if you got to the last and you got timed out. Leaving Kinloch leaving, I didn't care if I was getting timed out there, because if I did get timed out, I would have known in my own head I would have done my best to do that. And it's as you say, it's how are you going to feel if you do chuck it now? Are you injured? No, you're just a bit uncomfortable, well, a lot uncomfortable, but change your socks, change your buff, and get on with it and get it done.
Yeah. And never underestimate the power of brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. No.
2 points to make, and they're both about your husband, Ross. One, I'm crewing for him in November, so I'm looking forward to feeding his inner chimp.
Yes. He runs on almond lady fingers. So...
Well, we'll see about that. And the other one, in his defence, I've slept in a graveyard and there wasn't any complaints by the neighbours. So
yeah. Oh, that was one of those days.
I wasn't even in a race when I did it, so it was just I needed somewhere to sleep.
That was just a life choice.
Yeah, I think it was in Oban, and yeah, I needed somewhere to sleep, so I had my sleeping bag, and that's where I slept. So there you
down
go.
Wherever you are.
Right, moving on to the next listener question. It's something that we mentioned earlier. It's how do you change your mindset when you're increasing your distance? So as we said, get to the end of the fling and you've done 52, 53 miles. How do you convince yourself that I can do the rest of the West Highland Way?
I think the first part of this does have to come down to respecting the distance. Like, you don't underestimate it. You don't go, just because I could do 50 something doesn't mean I can do 90 something. Your training has to look different. So one of the first shifts that has to come from a mindset perspective is you have to be prepared to shift your training to be able to do that. And yes, there's physical aspects of that in terms of making sure that your training plan suits the terrain for what you're going to be running on, and you're getting those long runs in and all of that stuff. But there's also a shift in training yourself mentally just as much as physically, and really taking the time to consider, well, why do you want to do this? And so many of our conversations so far have come out, well, why do you do it? Why do you choose to do that? And the clearer you are on your motivation for doing it, and if that is, I want to find out how far I can go, cool, well, this step up in distance is a chance for me to find out how far I can go. And the more internal that motivation is, like intrinsic that motivation is, like if you're going, well, I ran 50 miles and I want to run 100 miles to impress my friends, really bad reason, right? Like, that's doing it to impress other people, not going to help you when you're out on the course. Sometimes it does, like that's like sort of charitable donation, or like your friends celebrating your hard work can be useful as like, I don't want to let people down, but it shouldn't be the sole motivator. So you really want to connect that to something meaningful for you. And if that is to challenge yourself mentally and physically, then write it down, have that written on Sharpie, in Sharpie on your arm, so that when you're out there, even if it's a training run, it's like, I can do hard things, because I want to be able to really think about like what that looks like. And there just has to be more time on feet. If you suddenly want to spend that, like, you have to spend a lot of time in your own head. I know that especially if you're near the front of the pack, right? You have to be really comfortable with your own inner voice if you're out on these. Even if you like sort of manage to buddy up with somebody for sections of the race, the longer the race becomes, the higher the likelihood of isolation and solitude. And we use isolation as the biggest form of punishment in human society. Like we take people away from others. So being okay with what you're like at your darkest moments becomes really important. And you have to almost make friends with that little gremlin in your head that is going to be picking away at you. And like the more you can have a conversation with that, the easier it is. Because if that takes over, then you're a goner. So you have to train in the discomfort zone to be able to do the hard thing.
Well, I can say that I have ran 200 miles in a dark tunnel.
I remember Ross telling me about this, and I think I just looked at him and was like,
Why?
Why?
He's also run up and down a hill multiple times as well, Alice. He's no right.
Yeah, I think we need a separate offline conversation, like, to try and get to the bottom of this. But it's really admirable, right? Because every single person that you say, "Oh, I did the tunnel," they'll be like, "Why the hell would you do that?" But again, it's you seeking that edge of your limitations.
Yeah.
Is it admirable though, Alice? Is it?
There's different definitions of success.
And that is not me being jealous of your success, Mike. That is me going, that's not what I mean.
Well, just to add to it, I my only ever DNF, I did the tunnel the first time, and I got to halfway, so just over 100 miles, because they advertise it as 200, but it's actually 214. So I did 107 miles, and I was waiting for heart surgery. The doctor had told me to take it easy. So I was taking it easy because I only did half the race. But that's my only ever DNF. Mm-hmm. So after I had heart surgery, this is 5 years ago now, I went back and did the race. So I've actually done 300 miles in the tunnel.
Did it feel like unfinished business because of that?
I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable of doing it.
I mean, I think you made the right decision the first time. I'm going to put that out there. I think the right decision might have been not starting the race at all, but that's a conversation for another day. But that unfinished business feeling is really important as well. It comes back to this idea of we need to be okay with failing and making mistakes. And like a lot of the time, it'll be people's DNFs that eat away at them. Like, I don't know, like, because I don't necessarily do this for fun myself. I do live with somebody that does this with fun. For you two, which is worse, it did not finish or it did not start?
I think I've had 3 did not starts, and seldom have they been my fault, as it were. It's like car breaking down. There was absolutely nothing I could do about that. But the DNF, I chose to stop. Mm-hmm. So that was my own fault. There was nobody to blame but me. The race that I did just 2 weeks ago, we stopped because the weather forecast had been, the National Trust had said the weather forecast in 11 hours time, yeah, that's right, 11 hours, it is going to be so bad we're going to stop the race. I couldn't have beaten my personal best. I couldn't have qualified for Great Britain with the time that I had available. So I chose, right, stop. But I'm comfortable with that. It was the right choice to make.
Yeah.
So it's...
Yeah, and I think it's a moment of controlling the controllables, which is such a massively overused phrase. But if you can't control whether you can't start or whether you have to stop, it's completely different to whether you feel like you failed or feel like you didn't make it.
Yeah, I at that race, I didn't fail. That the weather let me down. Mm-hmm. So it was out with my control. I had no... Yeah. I could have continued, but there was no point. So yeah.
I had my first DNS last weekend. And although it kind of was in my control because it was me that went over on my ankle in the Pentland 6 weeks prior.
That's not within your control. That's called an accident while you're running.
Yeah. So
did you know in that minute, like, see when you went over your ankle, where you're like, that's me done, I'm not going to be able to do this? Or how long did it take for you to come to terms with the fact that you might not start?
Oh, there was a heavy period of denial, but when it happened, I heard it go snap and went, oh my God, the fling.
Mm-hmm.
No, oh my God, how am I going to cope with doing the dishes and getting my family sorted? Oh my God, my race.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I did know deep down then that, it was a bad one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, I know myself that last weekend, because I went to volunteer at it as well, 100% it was the right decision not to start. My physio even said if you do start it, you will more than likely cause irreparable damage to the ankle and put yourself out for way longer than you want to be. But that feeling of not being there, not being able to do the training for the 6 weeks prior, I'm not going to lie, it's pish, because it's something I'd signed up to last October. So it was my big race of the year. But it's one of these, get over it. See, it's done. You just, there's nothing else for it.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
when we're moving up on the distances and we up the training or the training plan changes, when you have other life commitments, although runners tend to forget this, whether you're a parent, working, carer, anything like that, how do you overcome the guilt when you are out training and you are taking time for yourself?
I think this is where the communication within your relationship is the make or break aspect around this, because any performance sport, any high mileage sport is inherently selfish. And I say that as the wife of somebody that does it. But on the flip side, I spend 3 nights a week at gymnastics on a Saturday afternoon. Like if I use me and Ross as an example, I'm not saying a glowing example here, right? Because he's been doing this for what, 13, 14 years. There have been times when I'm like, you're taking the piss. I was like, absolutely not. No, if you want to do that run, you get out of your bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and go and get it done, because that is not having a knock-on effect on our entire family life. So I think the first thing we have to recognise is that there is a little bit of selfishness in here, but that's not always a bad thing. And I don't want those of you that are listening going, yes, I can be selfish, right? That is not what I'm saying here. As a parent or as a carer or just as somebody that has to function in society, taking time to do things that we enjoy is not a bad thing. Quite often there is guilt around, oh, I'm doing that just for myself. If you like anything, we should make time for that stuff. Right? If you look at what your normal week looks like, how much time we spend caring for others, doing school runs, looking after aging parents, cleaning the house, whatever it might be, and you were to make a list of all the things that bring you joy and happiness and fulfillment, and you compared the two lists, they're usually quite depressing to look at. So then making time for the stuff that's really important to us has to be a priority. And this really comes down, it's so boring, right? It comes down to time management and scheduling and open communication. Like Ross at the moment is building up to a rather large race, one that takes place in January and one that I'm already having sleepless nights about, right? We had a conversation before he signed up for it of, I think this, like he said to me, this is one of my bucket list races. I want to do it. I don't know if I can do it, like physically, if I'm going to get to the end or not. I don't think anybody standing on the spine start line knows if they're getting to the end or not, right? He says, I don't know if I can do it. There's a huge financial commitment here, and I'm like, yeah, that's your problem. You can deal with that. He's like, all right, I'll start a running coaching business. Let's go. But we had a conversation of, right, well, what does that look like in practice? Because we've got a daughter who's just started high school, a wee boy who's in P5. I run 2 businesses. We've started this business. We have a horse, just to throw stuff in for fun. Like we have commitments that require time, and if we don't schedule our time effectively, then that has a real knock-on effect on the family. So it starts off with, what does this look like? How do we make it fit? And for him, sometimes that is getting up at silly o'clock in the morning and getting his run in before work. Sometimes it's me saying, it's fine, I'll deal with the kids and whatever tonight, you go and run. Sometimes it's him taking one of the kids to whatever activity it is that they have and saying, right there in that for an hour and a half, I'm off to do my hills at the same time, and just being flexible around the fact that family life continues regardless. Stuff still needs to happen. But the more you communicate with the other person that's involved in that space, the easier it is. And if you've got that level of trust in your relationship, like I know that the next 3 months in our house are a write-off. I know that every conversation is going to be about the spine. In fact, if I look behind my laptop right now, I can see the increasing pile of stuff that is appearing in terms of jackets and shoes and bags and this. And I know that it's all that he is thinking about and will be all that he is thinking about. So I know that I'm taking on some of that mental load. And that's why, although it's a selfish sport, it's not an individual sport. Right? It is a team sport. The athletes that get to the end of these races, unless you have no other life commitments whatsoever and are financially independent, require other people's support to make it happen. So have the conversations around it, and also think, right, what are you showing your kids? Like, you're showing that you value exercise so much so that you're willing to get up early to go and do it, right, before it interferes with their life. You are showing them that it is important to look after your physical and mental health and well-being. Now, you can reframe it in terms of running is, like for Ross, that is his self-care. See, when he's injured, I'm like, can you just move out, please? Because like, I love that man dearly, but my God, he's like a bear with a sore head if he is injured. Because he and I'm assuming you and most of your runners, most of your listeners need to run to feel good. Like, you have got that dopamine loop so ingrained at this point that you need it. And I'm happier when he runs. Yesterday afternoon, in fact, was it yesterday? I don't know, one day this week, he was lying on the bed going, I don't want to. And I went, can you just go? He's like, I don't want to. I was like, okay, fine, have a nap with me then. He's like, oh, I can't. I was like, I know you can't. Will you just go, please? Because if you go and do that now, that means you will be more refreshed to do all your training plans later on, which means you can then sit and do pizza movie night with the kids when I'm out at gymnastics. He's like, okay, right. And he went and he did it and he came back and he felt better. So you need to share the experience with your family and let them be your cheer squad. Right, and also accept that we're not going to be at every finish line, because I don't turn up for anything less than 100 miles anymore.
It definitely helps to have a supportive partner, because, as you say, you've got a background in gymnastics and coach gymnastics. Is there any tips that you could give to the runners that aren't as lucky as Ross and don't have any, like, they've not got any desires in sport or anything like that? Like, is there a way you could help people understand what that means to us?
Yeah, I think it's just being open enough to have conversations around, this is something that's really important to me. What's really important to you? What do you need? Like, do you need me to be here on a Saturday afternoon? I'm like, yeah, I do need you to be here on a Saturday afternoon. It's like, what does this look like for you? And it's not that I took 3 hours to run, therefore I should get 3 hours to do something else. It's, what do you need? Where do you need that time? How do I make that time available for you? And that has to be a two-way conversation. Like, not everybody is going to understand why you do what you do, but if you can articulate why it's important to you and how it actually makes you better as a partner, as a parent, then like, it's relationship counselling is the answer to this, to be honest with you. It's getting to a stage in those relationships and those partnerships where you can have those conversations. And although I said that really flippantly, sometimes you do need someone else in the room to help those conversations along, because if you've gotten to a point where that relationship is dysfunctional and there is resentment from the other person around you doing what you're doing, you going, oh, but I need it for me, is just going to piss them off. Right? Yeah. So you actually need to get to a stage where you can strip those conversations back, because it's really fundamentally about, how does your life work? You are one half of that relationship. So what is your role and what's important to you, and what is important to them, and how can they support you and how can you support them? So It's how do you get to a point that you can have those conversations? And that's obviously different for everybody, but it's often starting it the other way around of what's important to you this week, what needs to get done so that I can fit what I need to get done around that. And you also have to recognise that this sort of sport is really blooming inconvenient. Right? It's inconvenient for everyone else that is involved. Like even today, I was late for this podcast because Ross took longer to run over a hill than he was meant to, and I was sitting in a car park waiting for him. Right? Now, I will sit in the car park and wait for him because I love him, but I'm also like, don't you make me late, because one of my core values is that I am never late for anything. But I'm also like, you ran up a really big hill today. Well done, you.
Right, on to the next listener question, but I'm going to split it into two because I think they're separate subjects.
Okay.
And the question was, how do you get over? And I think the two separate subjects are post-race blues and DNFs.
Yeah, I think when I saw that question come through as well, I was like, those are two separate questions because they're two totally different emotional responses. Like if we start with the post-race blues, essentially what we're experiencing in post-race blues is a depletion of all of the feel-good hormones, those endorphins, that serotonin, that dopamine, all of that disappears, right? All of that adrenaline disappears because you don't need it anymore. All the way through your training block before that race, your mind goes into that race, your energy goes into that race, whether that's for weeks before, whether that's a few days before, that takes a huge amount of emotional energy. Once you cross that finish line and get your t-shirt or your medal and go home and go back to society, there's almost like a readjustment of, oh yeah, the rest of the world is still here. Well, that kind of sucks, right? It's like, oh, I still have to go and put the washing on. Oh, people don't think I'm a hero because I ran a really long way. I'm still expected to pick the kids up from school, right? Whatever it might be, like those post-race blues appear in lots of different ways. So it's really just understand that it's normal, right? It is normal after a big event for there to be a big dip. And like you just have to look at the research for this around big life events, right? If you think about big positive life events like, I don't know, weddings or babies being born or certain birthdays or anniversaries, it's normal for it to go up, 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 crash, right? Post-wedding blues exists because everything is about you as the couple up until that point, and then the next day nobody cares, right? And you're looking at your bank account going, why did I spend so much money? I never even got any of those canapes, right? Let's go off on holiday now, right? It's normal for you to have that sink after that sort of honeymoon period wears out. It's the exact same after a race. Like you should factor it into your training. It's like, I might feel a bit rubbish for a few days or a couple of weeks after that, and it's often directly related to the amount of exertion. Like your body is healing and recovering. In order to do that, it shuts everything else down. It stops giving you your serotonin and your dopamine, and it says, I'm off to fix whatever it is you've just done to your feet. I'm off to repair a knee. Not properly, because why would our body repair something properly after we hurt it? But, I'll go and do my best. So I think with post-race blues, just accept that it's coming and build it into your recovery plan. DNFs are different because we've touched on DNFs a little bit, right? But for me, this is the DNF that is out, that is like, it's not, I've forgotten how to talk. It's not the DNF that was outside of your control. It's the DNF where you just didn't make it to that checkpoint in time, or something went wrong and you feel bad about it, right? You have to let yourself grieve. You've spent time, energy, effort, money, energy trying to make this thing work. And when it doesn't, it's normal to feel a bit disappointed. And that, if you look at what grief looks like, right? Grief we often associate with bereavement, but whenever we're disappointed, let down, or hurt by something, we kind of go through emotional grieving processes. They can last a couple of minutes, they can last a few weeks, they can last months, days, years, depending on what the grief is. But it's normal for you to deny it for a little bit, that I can't believe that just happened. Right? And we can stay in denial while going on with our lives for a little while. You just go, oh yeah, it's fine. Oh, I don't really care. Oh, do you know what? I'll do it again next time. And then at some point, reality will hit. Now, that could be as you DNF, or it could be sometime in the following days, weeks, months. when that moment of reality hits, it's normal to plummet. It's normal to get angry and frustrated. It's normal to play the blame game. You know, oh, it was my shoes. Oh, I didn't do enough training. Oh, it was this. Oh, it was that. Oh, it was a bunch of things that you can no longer control because they're in the past. Then we quite often hit what I refer to as the valley of despair. That sort of sinking feeling at the bottom where we have really low mood. Not necessarily a clinical depression or anything like that, but just like low mood. We feel unmotivated. We feel annoyed at the world. We're not interested in anything. We kind of lose excitement and joy from the things. We might be struggling to motivate ourselves to even get to a park run or put our shoes back on. Then what starts to happen is we come out the other side. Now, for some people, a DNF is enough to finish their running career. They go, no, I'm not playing anymore. They throw their toys out the pram and I don't know, they go and do something even more stupid like high rocks or whatever it is, right? They go, I'm not playing anymore, right? That is a legit response. Like you get to the valley of despair and you feel so uncomfortable that you're like, well, I'm just not playing. Right, and you go and you find the next thing and the next thing, and actually for some people that's the right pathway. For others it's not. No, if you're trying to distract yourself with something else but really you just want to get back into the hills, it's time to go through an acceptance period and say, right, I accept that that didn't go well. What am I going to do differently next time? Which parts of that DNF were in my control and which parts weren't? And if that happens again, what will I do differently? And then you just have to adjust your training plan. Have a chat with yourself and your mindset, or find yourself a mindset coach that you can have that conversation with, and deal with it. You know, work out what do I do differently, and accept that just because you change things doesn't mean you're going to get a wildly different result the next time. But if you change the right things, you're much more likely to get the right result. And actually, the success after a failure feels better than the success the first time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think this is not a DNF. This is a temporary thing that I'm going to say. We have been going for probably about an hour and a half so far. We're going to keep on going, but we're going to split it into 2 episodes. So Alice, please come back for another episode if you'll have us, because fascinating conversation.
Absolutely. If your listeners are willing to listen to me whitter on, then fine.
Or some of them will be raging if we do stop it because they'll be halfway through the long runs.
Well, I'm gonna. It's a backyard. We are on a temporary break until the next yard. So it's for tonight. It's goodbye from me, and thank you, Alice, for fascinating conversation. Thank you, Nikki, for being Nikki, and until next time.
Thanks, Alice.
See you later.